Amazing. Welcome back. I'm so excited to be here with the phenomenal Kelley Nicole Palmer, who I met in the DEI space, and I just fell in love with this magnificent being. Kelley, thank you for being here. Welcome.
Thank you so much for welcoming me and for that warm greeting. I was grateful to meet you in the space where I met you leading the race and equity workshop. And I'm grateful to meet you, Lauren, for the first time.
Yes, great to meet you.
And will you please just share with us your origin story and like how you got started and how you got to be the creature before me?
Sure. So I'm a Black person. I identify as a Black person. I identify as a queer person, a lesbian, and cisgendered woman. And I was raised and born in the American South in North Carolina, particularly in the city of Charlotte, which is sugary and catawba land. And um, yeah, I mean, I had a pretty, I guess what we want to call a standard upbringing in the American South, being raised like more in a religious space and came to like wellness and mindfulness practices um, in an interesting way, starting in like my early 20s. But when I was 33, 30-ish, like 32, 33, I decided that I wanted to take a teacher training. I was taking like private yoga sessions from another Black woman in a bigger body in the city and where I lived in Charlotte. And I felt like I wanted to make it more accessible to other Black people and quickly recognized the like what they were calling the yoga community in that city was super white and not on a coincidence. And so my mom is a librarian and my dad it was a historian, and they had a huge emphasis on like being curious about not only what you're experiencing but like what other people are experiencing. And my family collectively had a big push and influence around the fact that we as Black people deserve whatever we want. And the only way that we are going to have those things is by working really hard, which I don't necessarily align with, but also not just like people aren't going to give it to us. People don't value us in the same way that we might value ourselves. And so, like, you got to be questioning and pushing and advocating for yourselves and others. And that came with me into the yoga space. So very quickly in my like yoga teaching space, my emphasis was on equitable access, particularly for other Black people. And that emphasis or like wanting to advocate for people's access has expanded beyond just Black folks, right? But also that's still at the center for me. And so um, mostly I have been asked to come into yoga teacher trainings and other yoga spaces to educate on how racism impacts wellness spaces. And I've been doing that work for close to 10 years. And I'm tired, so I'm not doing it anymore. You're meeting me at a very interesting place. I'm walking away from doing that work. Not because I don't think it's important or needed, but at this point, it feels like low hanging fruit and a waste of my time. It feels like not best use of my energy. And so I am concluding, wrapping up doing that. I think my last few trainings are at the beginning of 2023. And I'm more focused on building some spaces for Black people and other BIPOC folks, queer folks, that make it less necessary for us to be dependent, let's say, on like yoga studios for us to have yoga, but in other ways too, around food, around housing, around just general care. Um, and so right now I sit in front of you as a writer and a creative who is working mostly in community spaces, Black-led community spaces, but also a person who's trying to focus more on being than doing. So I'm spending a lot of my time hiking, making food, watching science fiction movies, reading and collaging, spending time with my family and community. Um, I've said it some other places, so I'll say it here. I've kind of dropped the idea of like a career, so I'm not focused on building the next thing. I'm more focused on using the talents and gifts and training and knowledge that I have to work with other people so that we can live um, in right relationship with ourselves, but also in right relationship with the world around us. And it leaves me feeling a bit adrift because I'm a planner by nature and I always have the next thing set up. and I don't have the next thing set up. And the next thing is just being with what is happening right now. Yeah, I think that answers your question. I hope.
It feels like a return to the old ways, like this, like just being. It feels like a return to the way it was. I mean, you think about our ancestors, our pre-colonial ancestors, um, and you think about how they existed, probably with focuses and interests, but not with this like driven career, this like I must become this thing, the next thing, and climbing that ladder.
Yeah. I'll say for myself, there's been a few things that have like brought me to this place. And like the most recent is last year, in August, my dad died. And we had a like an interesting and complex relationship. But also I think maybe some other people have this experience of like losing people in your life that you've known your whole life, and it awakening your own like sense of mortality. So like I hold that I'm an infinite being, but I am here for a finite amount of time. And my dad is only 26 years older than I was. And so when I think about myself in 26 years, I'm like continually asking myself, like, how do I want to be living at that time? And for one, I don't want to be on Zoom explaining the definition of racism. It's like, I don't even want to be doing it next week. So I don't want to be doing it in 26 years. But also, I mean, we can ignore it if we want to, but we're being told in so many ways that in 26 years, if we don't change what we're doing right now, we might not even be able to be on this earth. So I like this earth. I think it's a beautiful planet. And I'm also raising people who will be younger than I am in 26 years. And so I would want the earth to be sustainable for them. And I don't control the whole world, but I do control me. And so my dad died. And then I also watched this documentary called Exterminate All the Brutes. It's by the same person who made I'm Not Your Negro, a documentary about James Baldwin's like last few years of life and last unpublished work. He made this documentary basically about the impact of colonialism across the globe. And it's a really good documentary. People should watch it. But when it went off, I just had this awareness of like, so wait, they all know. And when I say they all know, I mean like people holding power and hoarding resources. They all know the impacts. There's not a coincidence. It's not like they did a thing and then it spiraled into these other things that weren't unknown. They did a thing hoping that it would be this way, that it would lead to where we are right now, which feels baffling to me. And if I'm in a practice, a mindfulness practice that asks me to be in self study, and part of that self study is best use of my own energy from Acharya, how is it best use of my energy to be explaining countless times over and over and over again how these systems work? And I guess supporting people in thinking that we're going to go inside these systems and change them. How is this better use of my energy than just working with other people to build new ways and new systems so that we don't need these other systems anymore? It almost feels like a scam. Like, oh, you're so bright and you're so brilliant and you see through this system. Come and explain it to us over and over and over and over again. And the feeling I had was like, they know it's working exactly how it's supposed to work. I'm not going to continue to use my finite amount of time. Let's just say I only have 26 more years. I think I have longer than that, but let's just say, how am I going to use these 26 more years? Like helping people use better wording on their yoga flyers and on their website and on their social media and teaching people the right things to say, or working with people who also see that these systems are working exactly the way they're designed and are invested and committed to building something differently. And I'm choosing the latter to, yeah, not do that work anymore. And I think that awareness was building over time, but it felt clear to me. And it's daunting, or it can feel daunting and overwhelming to walk away from something that's easy to do. It's easy to book trainings and talk to people about racism, and not from the space of like, it's not a hard subject or it doesn't impact me because it's also part of my lived experience and connects to the experience of other humans that I care about and feel accountable to, right? Black folks, POC folks, queer folks, I feel accountable. But it's easy in terms of like, right now it's popular, so I have to turn down more work than I can actually do. And we live in a capitalist system where I need resources to exist just like everybody else. And so it's like walking away from work, but also it's very freeing and liberating to say, like, I'm not doing that anymore. Yes, I'm working with people, I'm working all the time on things, but there are things that one don't have a place on social media because also social media is not that great. And there are things that don't really connect to what we've been taught makes a person successful. And so I'm having to like build the ship, be on the ship, and work on the story I have about the boat in the first place.
Well, it sounds like, well, this is the realization I just had recently because this is Scorpio season. Um, that like we're all trying to save a ship that's dying. We're like all
Mhm.
trying to save something that is its last stages. It's inevitable that it's not sustainable, and with more people being aware of it, it's not going to survive. Like it can't, basically.
Mhm.
And so instead of trying to convince people that it's dying and that we're going to try to save some form of it, because I ultimately think it just needs to crash and burn,
Mhm.
that you're creating something that's for the future. Like, and that's why even the formation of this podcast, I said we can't just decolonize, we need to like create a future that's like post-colonial, that's a future that's like the futurists, the creatives, people who have the vision to see where we're meant to go. So that's kind of, I feel like a lot of people on this journey are grappling with that. Like maybe we should stop focusing on saving, but like creating.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think it's I feel like multiple things, right? I have a lot of sadness because even if we just think about the last 3 years of our lives, like our collective lives, they aren't what we would have imagined for ourselves. And there are definitely parts of myself, and I assume other people and folks that I know that like wish some things were back in the way that they were before, like gathering with people. I miss gathering with people. I miss like hosting retreats. And it's not going back. Like it's not, we're never going to go back to how we were before, no matter how much people want us to. And we shouldn't, because how we were living before was not sustainable. Like you said, like, I don't actually think we're on a sinking boat. I think we're on a piece of wood that we were told was a boat, and it's not a boat. It's a piece of wood, and it can only hold you up for so long because it wasn't treated. It doesn't like keep the water off. People have been falling off and dying on this thing all along. It's just now I think people had an opportunity to sit back and really observe the parts of their lives that didn't align. And I know for me, like there's so many things that I centered as important, like work, that it's hard to say, but like I don't care about working. I don't care about it. I understand why I have to do it in a capitalist system. And, like 2 days ago, we were riding from the store with our children and we were talking about money and how it's not real. And like it's assigned a value by whomever is in charge of assigning a value, but it's not a real thing the way like trees are or the air is or the water. Like these are real things that we actually need to exist. We don't need money to exist. But how do we get everybody to hold that when at the same time, if I don't pay my rent today, I might not have a place to live? And I think people had an opportunity to like view that and look at that. And to your point, Laura, like for me, it feels like it's going to require a critical mass of us being willing to step back, perhaps lose some of the comfort that we are used to. And I mean comfort in terms of like living, for instance. All of us live in our own independent places, I'm assuming, and you live with a small amount of people. And it's like, this isn't actually sustainable for all of us to have 1,000 square feet, 2,000 square feet, 10,000 square feet. It's more sustainable for us to be living in community and like small communities because then some people can grow food. Some people could, I guess, work to make money. Some people could take care of children. Some people could take care of sick folks. But this will require people releasing the idea that you are successful because you can afford to take a loan out for $1 million or $500,000 place. And this to me feels like a lot of work and a lot of heavy lifting. But I'm willing to do it. It's just, are there enough of us who, and myself included, right? Like, I love clothes. I've been talking with people about this recently and recognizing how harmful clothing production is in the world. And like, I made a promise to myself that I wasn't buying myself any more new clothes in 2023. Doesn't mean I won't maybe get things that are new to me, but I'm not going to purchase new items. And it's going to be hard to do because clothes are pretty and they're going to put out new ones next year that are, I'm going to want, you know what I'm saying? But is that more important than living in a more sustainable way? It's not. And I'm saying all that to say, like, can we collectively build our capacity to give up these comforts in the name of not just equity, but like viability for all of us?
And accountability.
Yeah.
Do you think that we're reaching that critical mass, like, of people?
I'm going to say yes. And I don't know. You know what I'm saying? I think that we live in siloed ways, right? And, like my partner and I were talking about it the other day. We watched a preview about a documentary about Disney that's coming out. I don't know if y'all have heard of it, but one of the heirs, one of Roy Disney's granddaughters, basically was contacted by people who work for Disney saying, like, you got a lot of money, we barely can like make a living. And part of what they showed in the documentary is that it would take, I think the person said, 10,000 years for someone on Disney's custodial staff to make what the president makes in 1 year. And we were watching it, and it is sick. It's disgusting. The word I like to use is dastardly. And because it's not an accident. Like, it's not an accident that you, one, underpay your people, but also you overcharge, and people without means spend years saving to come here. And then you're underpaying the people, but every day your park is nearly sold out. So you're making money on top of money. And that's not even talking about merchandising, movies, your television channels, your streaming stuff. Like, y'all are making money. You're just choosing not to equitably distribute it to humans. That's one thing. So, but anyway, we were talking about what would it take for people who are raising children to walk away from Disney. And I don't feel hopeful about it. I hope that people would care enough to see this documentary and be like, we're never giving them a dime. But I was like, even in my own family, I know people who that would be a very big struggle to say to them, like, okay, our kids can never watch Disney movies again.
And they own
Well,
Marvel,
look at
so it's like adults too.
Yeah. I mean, like, I want to see the next Black Panther.
Yeah.
And also that means giving money to Disney. We love watching the Encanto, but like, can I watch that? So I'm saying that to say, like, it's this tricky place of, particularly as Americans, we hold a story that we should have what we want and have access to what we want. And so are there enough people who care about it and walk away? I don't know. Because I even watch very impactful documentaries about the planet and the earth. And when they bring it back around, they still bring it back around to how this is going to impact capitalism and hurt us economically. And it's like, so we just talked about how like the water's not clean and all we're worried about is how this is going to impact the world financially. Humans need water to live. We need it to live. This is going to impact our ability to live on the planet, not our ability to have money. And that part makes me feel less hopeful. But also I try to live in a both and place, right? So like I can feel a little hopeless and also hold that, like, Harriet Tubman was helping people escape from enslavement with no promise that enslavement would ever end or that she would be successful. Every single time her life could have been lost, the lives of all the people that she was transporting, and she didn't stop. And as a result, I'm experiencing a liberation that she did not experience, that many of my ancestors did not experience. So, can I also be in my mindfulness practice of non attachment and just say, like, this is right action? I don't need to be connected to when this like shift occurs, but I can know if I'm not in the right action, it never will.
Mm.
So I stay with it, knowing that like some of the things that I want to work on, that I am working on, won't even fully manifest in my lifetime. And can I be okay with that, that I'm not doing this for me? I'm not even doing it for my children. And that feels hard in a world that tells us that you should only do actions that are good for you or the people you care about.
Does being in right action, do you think that sets you up for, or sets anyone up, for the mindset that can lead to, how do I want to say this, like manifesting? Because so we hear a lot of work, a lot of talk about manifestation. Laura also wrote a book on manifestation. You wrote a book on manifestation. You also teach a course around reimagining and envisioning. Um, and I think of it as being aware of what is and acknowledging that, which can disrupt a bit of the process of manifestation because it disrupts our ability to envision, especially if all that we see around us is in contradiction with the world that we want to create. Where does right action fit in, and how does one create that? Do you know what I'm saying? What I'm asking? Like, how does one create that?
Well, what I'll say is the book that I have, I re-released it. I re-released it actually last year. The same day my dad died was the day the book was like live to be purchased. And I had to rewrite it because the initial version for me centered capitalism in a way that I actually find kind of disgusting in like manifest communities or like abundance talk. Because one, it holds the story that the movement of one particular resource, money, can be controlled by an individual. And I don't believe that. I don't believe that. I think that money is distributed exactly how it's supposed to be distributed. And occasionally, someone figures out a way to acquire and hoard a large amount of money. And I have yet to witness someone in an abundance mindset manifesting for the greater good, meaning, like, I recognize that, let's just say if tomorrow we wanted to make a farm, it costs money in a capitalist system to acquire the land, the seeds, the equipment, all of these things. And I'm not saying people aren't using their ability to create to do that. But often what I hear is like, I want to use my ability to create to acquire resources and hoard them in the same way as the people who were doing it to me. And I'm going to keep doing that to other people also, and then hold over their head that the reason they don't have it is because their mindset is not correct. When the reality is, money only holds value, and my partner taught me this, as long as other people don't have it. So why would I want to focus my energy and time on manifesting more of that? I personally don't. What I want to focus more on is manifesting liberated spaces for people to be whole, for people to be connected to joy. And I understand that right now that requires money, but like, what happens when we use this like ancient knowledge, right? This abundance mindset to think beyond money. And to me, that speaks to what you're saying. Like, I don't think that people are thinking about manifesting money, let's just say, because they're greedy. I think people are focused on manifesting money because we've all been raised that capitalism is a good and just and right system. And that we think that by having access to that thing, we can cultivate a life for ourselves that is peaceful, where we have time, where we can relax, where we have joy. But is that real if it means that it denies that to other people? And so it's like, could we do work to investigate why we even believe in capitalism? Could we do work to manifest the reality where money isn't necessary for people to have the needs that they have, which is, I mean, we're just talking about people's basic needs: food, housing, care, medicine. People shouldn't have to pay for that. But if you believe that inside of you, then you're going to connect that when you're doing this manifesting work too. Like you're holding that story about yourself too. And that feels hard to unwind. I mean, that reimagining workshop that I've been doing really isn't about like, how do you reimagine yourself with like more money, but more of like, how do you reimagine the value you've placed on work, on acquiring things, on titles, on being recognized in white spaces? Um, can you revisit those stories, right, of what makes you valuable and get to a clearer answer that like you deserve housing because you exist. You deserve food because you exist. You deserve time to be in joy because you exist, not because you've been a hard worker or because your mindset's right. And I want to be working with, and I feel grateful to know other people who can hold that while we still do our unlearning work around like money.
There's a,
As
I
you
don't
were,
know if you've ever read the book Social,
Mm-mm.
but they've actually studied this where they studied what makes humans happy. And
Mm-hmm.
everybody will say, like, what do you want to manifest? They'll say money, right? But it's
Mm-hmm.
been scientifically proven that money doesn't make people happy. You
Mm-hmm.
need like they found that like in our Western society, we need $50,000 to cover our like basic needs, but anything above that actually lessens people's experience of happiness. The number one predictor of happiness is intimate relationships, and yet that's the thing that people don't invest in.
Yeah. I mean, part of the place that I'm at in my own like life, but also in teaching is like, how do we get people to actually build authentic relationships with one another? But what gets in the way of that is, I mean, it's whiteness, it's white culture, it's this individualism, it's um, the need for everything to be a transaction, the need for everything to be like mutually beneficial, whatever that means. And it's it's a test, right, for me in this moment, along with my partner, of we're raising young people. They're 8 and 6, and there's a lot about their life that is different than other people that are their age. Meaning, like they had never been to school before now. We don't do a lot of the same things that some of the other families at their school do, from the way we eat to how we spend our free time. And part of it is around trying to teach them the real value of things, right? That money really is not important, but what is important is your ability to care for others, even if it is inconvenient for you. Your ability to take such good care of yourself that when it is time for you to serve, you don't feel depleted. And that's something that I'm still trying to learn because I spent so long thinking, particularly as a feminine identified person, that one of the highest honors I can have is to sacrifice my entire life to take care of other people. And I can be in community and build authentic relationships with people, but not if I'm not also declaring my own needs, making boundaries for myself, demanding care at the same time. And to your point, Lauren, I think that people are so used to hiding who they are on the most deepest levels, right? From like sadness to anger. Like people are used to putting on a disguise to interact with the world and like segmenting themselves in places. And for me, like it's wonderful for people to learn about the history of colonialism, enslavement, Jim Crow, impacts of white culture across the globe. And also, like, I say to people all the time in workshop, and you probably heard me say this in the one I was in with you, Brittany. It's like the main work you need to do is figure out why you agreed not to be your whole self and what it would take for you to be your whole self. Because if you can do that particular work, then it becomes very easy to be in space with other people because then they feel the space to be whole. And in your wholeness, you really can evaluate, like, oh, wait a minute. So I, like, for instance, I really used to allow my mood and my self-image to be impacted by decimals and digits on a screen when I log in to check my bank account balance. And I'm not saying I don't still have to evaluate that, but this has nothing to do with my value. When I check my bank account balance and it's lower than what I perceived, expected, desired, this is a system that has failed, not me. I couldn't have saved better, been smarter, not did this to it's designed to be stripping me of resources all the time. So it's doing what it's designed to do. How much of my personal energy am I going to put into that? And if I'm really in authentic community, which is what I've been experiencing for about the last 2.5 to 3 years, I always have what I need, even if I'm not the one holding what I need. And that makes community and like relationships way more important than money, titles, possessions. Because to your point, it doesn't actually make people happy. The more you have, the more you have to take care of also.
Where does where do wants and like joy come in to that? Because I know that we've gotten used to, like, especially here in the US and in Western society in general, white dominated society, which is pretty much the entire planet, but specifically
Yeah.
in the Western world, um, we we do want things. And do you think that goes away with the, like?
No, I want things. I think that it's really an evaluation of what you want and the ability to ask yourself why you want a thing. And is that want connected to a greater good? And the reality that I'm navigating, so this might not be the same for everybody, is that when I have wants that aren't actually what's best for the greater good, it's rooted in a story of whiteness. Like even around clothes, like I think clothes are beautiful. And also I recognize that looking a particular way makes people value you better, makes people treat you nicer. And so I have to undo the story that having new clothes or the prettiest clothes or the most fashionable clothes is a part of how I'm valued in the world. It's not. I mean, I've experienced it for the last 3 years. Most people have only seen me from the the decollage up. Like y'all don't even know I have on gym shorts with this leopard sweater. You know what I'm saying? Like
Same.
this is an illusion. This is an illusion. And how long do I want to live in that illusion? And so, like, even around joy, when I talk with people about joy, there's a story that joy is like skipping through a field in the perfect outfit, and your hair is perfect, and you're the perfect weight, and you're loved by a person that you think is perfect, and your children are perfect, and you're so happy, and nothing can like make you sad. And that's not what I hold joy as. Part of the definition of joy is your connection to well-being and having the things that you need. And so it's like when you reframe joy as like, for me, joy is more than just being happy. It's feeling sure, it's feeling safe, it's feeling like I can be my whole self. And I can cultivate that without financial or like money type things. It's like I was sick last week, I shared with you all, and I was in the bed for almost 10 days. My whole family was in the bed. We didn't leave home. We ordered food and just had it like left on our doorstep, that type of stuff. And the first day we were all feeling well. We went for a hike, which is not something that Kelley 5 years ago would have centered as like the thing to do to make myself feel better or to like be reminded that how I was feeling was temporary. But it was perfect medicine. And so it's like I want to hike all the time. The only thing that gets in the way of me going hiking is that I have to work for money to pay for where I live and food and like gas to drive to the hiking place. So can I want hikes? Yeah. Should I be able to go hiking whenever I want to? Yes. And I know that the work that I want to do makes it possible so that lots of people can experience that, not just me.
You
So that other people can have access to joy, not just me or like my family.
you mentioned the word whiteness several times on this conversation, and it's
Yes.
interesting because like whiteness itself is a made up term, it's an illusion.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So like can't even say whiteness on TikTok because I will get shadow banned. It's like you have to
Yeah,
make up all these like um, terms to even say that word, right? So do
yeah,
you mind defining that for people who don't know
yeah.
what it means?
So I'll say what I mean. When I'm speaking of whiteness, I'm not talking about individual people. I'm talking about this illusionary concept of whiteness that says that people with whiter skin who are white appearing have more value. That says that their way of being, speaking, eating, moving is more important than anyone else. And that anyone who doesn't live into it, doesn't look like that, doesn't aspire for that is abnormal or dysfunctional or wrong or bad. And, a lot of times in DEI spaces, people want to use the term white supremacy, which it's a term I taught around that term for a while. And one, sound is important. And I'm not going to keep saying that whiteness is supreme over and over again. I'm just not. It's not. It's not. Secondly, I feel as if people who, for whatever reason, still want to identify with whiteness as a culture are able to say, like, well, that's separate from the culture that I'm a part of. And, my challenge for people is like, please email me the part of white culture that's outside of the harm of systems of oppression. There isn't a part that isn't a part of that, that isn't impacted by that, from the way that we look, the way we uphold gender, the way we uphold cis heteronormativity, the way we think about resources, the way we live, the way we're educated, the way we eat, how we travel. Like, it's not a separate thing. And so I talk about it as one thing. Like, this is white culture. The notion that white people are more important is white culture. Is the base for the entire thing. We don't got to make it separate. And I know that activates people. I've witnessed people being activated around me saying it, and I'm glad they're activated. They should
I know. I
investigate
was like,
why
it's
they
kind
feel
of
so
fun.
attached. They should, I mean, they really should investigate for themselves why they're so attached to a thing that harms everyone, including themselves. Like, whiteness harms white people too, but they're really attached to it. And sometimes people say, like, I'm not attached to whiteness. I'm like, you are, because it's part of what you've been told is special about you. It's part of what you've been told makes you important, makes you smart, makes you good. And many of us have never lived under that story that we are automatically good, and have had to really work and really hold a story that we should work hard to prove our goodness. And that's even part of like our desire to be hardworking and have a career plan. And I release it. I'm good because I
I love
exist.
it.
You know what I mean? I release it. But also, it's hard work to release it because that story is reinforced in every moment.
And it's hard to release it because that's where we derived our value from.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you like, I've experienced this throughout the many times I've been unemployed. When someone asks you like, what do you do, and you say, I don't have a job, it's like, okay, then what am I worth? What? I have
Yeah,
nothing.
yeah, 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 yeah. It's yeah. I mean, I think that, like we started out saying in the beginning, we're at a very critical, changing time. And I think that people are afraid, so they want to hold to like, no, no, no. Like, we've been through like, let's say a recession, which is a made up change of value around things that that under resources the people with the least amount of resources, and over resources the people with the most resources, right? We've made it through that before, and we'll make it through it again. And I'm like, perhaps, but we haven't done it while also sitting on the middle of a pandemic, a global pandemic that's still killing people every single day, while also navigating in our lifetime the most like vocal activism, not just in the US, all over the world. People are protesting and uprising all over the world while we navigate climate change that is making it almost impossible to even exist in certain places. And that's only going to increase. And my invitation, particularly to people of color, is like, we got to build our capacity to step away from these systems and not place ourselves in them, thinking that in some way we're going to disrupt them enough to change them. That's not going to happen.
Mm.
I was
How
actually,
does
go ahead.
I was just going to ask you how this begins. Like, how does this play into your nonprofit? Because the nonprofit that you have supports um, a lot of different people, a specific group of people. I want you to speak on it, so I'm not going to speak
Yeah,
on it.
yeah. Yes. So the Sanctuary in the City is a North Carolina-based nonprofit that I'm a part of, that focuses on like equitable access to healing spaces for Black people. And what we've learned in doing that work is that if people don't have housing, if they don't have food, which is common sense, they're not going to care about coming to a yoga class or a breath and meditation class. So our work has changed into mutual aid. So we do run programming. Like right now, we run, I think, one of the only Black led, Black autonomous eating disorder peer support groups online.
Wow.
It's free for people to attend. The facilitators are paid, but it's a peer led space and it is helping people. Also, though, like often people in that space don't have what they need for treatment or medicine. And so trying to use fundraise money and redistribute it for people to just be able to meet their basic needs and remove a lot of the like transaction or hoop jumping that is a part of charity, and stepping away from a charity mindset of like, oh, well, look at us holding money, let us help you, and more of a space of like, what does our community need? How can we raise this money and just give it to people without making them like show you financial records or prove that they need, like, we know humans need housing and we know most people are underpaid. So if a person emails me and says they don't have what they need for rent, why would they lie about it? And if they're lying about it, that doesn't have anything to do with me. I just want to redistribute the money. And um, this work, like with Sanctuary, feels really important. And also, it's gate kept because we're a 501c3, and most large funders won't just give you money to give away to other people, even if they know that money, like for instance, we run a mutual aid program for Black non male people who are experiencing domestic violence. And it looks like paying for phones, new apartments, plane tickets, bus tickets, medical care, new furniture, new clothes, like whatever people need to leave these situations. Last year, sometime we got a grant for $50,000, which is a lot of money to help people because we're passing out like about $500 at a time. However, we couldn't give any of that money away as mutual aid. We can only use it for programming to educate about domestic violence and how to exit. But every study shows that the number one barrier for leaving an abusive situation is finances. So what make it make sense? Do you want us to help people or not? And so it's been interesting and frustrating and very educational to try to figure out how to navigate that, how to change that.
One of your
Yeah.
pillars is self-determination,
Yeah.
and I love that one. As somebody, as a Black queer woman who experiences the intersections of oppression and really like realizing that and owning that in this, world that's abusive to you, how do you find, like, what source do you tap into to find your own self-determination?
Yeah. One, I don't readily place myself in spaces that are not Black led, whether that's for my own practice or community. And I know people might have feelings about that, but it is what it is. I don't want to have to explain certain things. I don't want to have to deal with certain things. And I can find a bit of like safety in those spaces. With that being said, homophobia is going to be present in all community spaces. And so, like, it's also for myself stepping away from heteronormativity because I was not out for most of my life. And so it's like I spent a lot of time being really well practiced and looking and appearing as a straight person. And that did harm to me and other people, people in my life and just in the world. Like anytime we're not our whole selves, we're harming ourselves and the world around us. And so like I don't do that anymore. And I'm gonna be centering queer media and Black spaces, but also like Brittany already knows I got some real firm boundaries. So like I don't work all the time. I'm really only forward facing Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday from 12 to 4. And people say like, well, that makes it inconvenient. I'm like, if it can't happen during those times, it's not meant for me to do. Perhaps there's another person. And sometimes I make changes or shift around what feels important to me. We're talking before 12 o'clock on a Wednesday, but I center joy before I center any other thing. And this is a practice I've had to build over time. But like I said, for me, joy is being sure that my well being is important and valued. And I can do that for myself, even while navigating these other systems. I can say to myself and the world around me, I don't have the capacity to work this week. Maybe because I'm sick, but maybe just because I need a freaking break and I'm going to take one. And for myself, not being afraid necessarily of the ramifications of that.
You've taught me
I
so
have,
much, just on a regular basis. I wanted to say that I've learned so much from you, sitting in your workshops, but also just having the opportunity to chat with you and connect with you separately. And you've taught me a lot about language and about, I think unintentionally or maybe intentionally, softness, also as a form of resistance and as a form of liberation. And it makes me think of what I assume your answer would be, but I'm going to ask you the question anyway, which is,
okay.
what work do you think that the BIPOC, the queer BIPOC, marginalized people in general have to do in order to create change? And the same for white-bodied people.
Right. Well, I mean, I'm going to answer first around like Black folks and other undervalued or underestimated identities. I think that we need to stop doing so much work. I think that learning to be more than we do is a really important lesson. And that's not something that I came to on my own. It makes me think about my grandpa used to say, like, you're either going to do it by force or by choice. And I think that for myself, there's been a lot of forcing around slowing down and stopping. The pandemic was a huge one for me. I've worked for myself since I was a teenager. And so I very much have hustle mentality down. I know how to monetize a thing really quickly. Um, and in the last, I'll just say decade of my life, I've become a parent. I've been married and divorced. I came out as a queer person. I went through a pandemic. I lost two parent figures. And it's taught me a lot about the story that I was holding about myself. And so, like, the invitation I would make to other Black people, other people of color, other like non binary folks or trans folks, queer folks, is like the only work we have to do is remembering. We need to remember our value. We need to remember the value of each other. We need to remember what it actually means to be in community with one another and to actually care about each other and like release the story that whiteness has created that we aren't valuable and we have to like work to prove that, work to attain, right? Which is going to look really resistant because the main thing I tell people in my one-on-one time with folks is like, stop working all the time. Like, I understand that we need resources to live, and also maybe how we live needs to change so we're not so dependent on that particular resource, right? And I'm not saying that callously. I understand what it is to like really be under resourced and not know how you're going to pay for where you live and what you're going to eat. Like, I've experienced that. And I'm not experiencing it now, and it's not because I have a great like business plan. I am well compensated for the work that I do because I got real strong boundaries, and I work probably the least that I've worked in my entire life. I have what I need because I'm in community with people who are connected to making sure I have what I need, and vice versa. And that looks like a whole lot of different things. So like that's what I would say. Instead of like working on a career aspiration, really aspire to be an authentic community where you can be your whole self with the people around you and they love you and value taking care of you because that is going to be more sustainable than any retirement plan that you might cultivate for yourself, because money ain't real. Secondly, neither is time. So like release that too. And then what I would say for people who sit close to whiteness and white culture through identity, self-identity, and outward identity is like the same thing needs to happen. And also, y'all got to redistribute your resources. And I'm not just talking about money. It's like, even if we're just talking about land, most of the land on this continent of North America is held under deed by white identifying people. And a lot of it is just sitting empty, not being used for anything, or worse, used to be lawns and like other like non-people needing things. And it's like, if you hold land, you need to give this land up to people who actually want to use it to grow food for humans, because we don't grow most of our food here in the US. And a change is going to have to come because humans need food to eat to exist. We don't need another cell phone, another fancy watch, another electric car, another new green building. We need food to be grown by people and for people to have access to that food. And so, like, I would invite people who identify with whiteness, even if they are not resourced, to think about the power that even their identity holds for them to be advocating for this. Because right now, white culture is held as a standard and a norm. And it is not the obligation, responsibility, or within the wheelhouse of non-white people to change white culture. White people are going to have to change their culture. And, you know, I ask in trainings, like, why would you want to hold on to a culture that says you got to segment yourself? You can only live this way if you want to be valuable. And you're going to spend the rest of your life working to prove that value, to die without like people to take care of you who actually care about you. Like, why would you want that for yourself and other people? And I think, you know, there's a balance of white people offloading, dismantling, and rebuilding white culture, and non-white people remembering who the fuck we are. We have a culture that already instilled these things, and white people did too, right? They also lived in small communal ways, taking care of one another with rituals. And so like everybody needs to remember who they are, but particularly people of color, like even though they've tried to rip our culture away, it still shines through in everything that's eaten, all the music, all the clothes, how people decorate their homes. And it's like, just reclaim that for yourself. Reclaim that we're not meant to live in these small 2, 3, or 4 person households. We're meant to live with 10 or 15 people who we see as community and family, and to pool our resources and take care of one another. Like, remember that. Remember, there was a time when the main focus of our day was just on our basic needs, not on 50-11 emails that are going to guarantee you a salary so you can get a mortgage. And it's just, remember, that's like the work that needs to be done versus like, well, we need to get better books in the schools. Dismantle the schools. They're not in place for the benefit of people, particularly not children. Your workplace, I don't care how many benefits they have. And the reality is they're underpaying you to do a thing that they're making millions of dollars to do. The end. Even as a self-employed person, I owned a hair salon for 10 years. I was a hairstylist for 15 years. I was in the business of making hair care companies very profitable while barely scraping by, and asking other people who are barely scraping by to pay me to do that. And it's like, there's so many ways that this could exist that are far beyond what we would perceive as normal. And we don't got a lot of space to talk about it here on the podcast, but like there's infinite possibilities for the people who want to be hairstylists to just do hair because it's fun, in their community to make sure they have what they need. In the same way, there's space for people to be wellness providers, whatever that means, meditation, yoga, medicine, whatever, have your needs met and it not be this actional thing. But we're not going to get there if people don't get into a practice of remembering what has been stolen from us. Yeah. Thank y'all.
Yeah, I'm
It was lovely.
so inspired by your trust in yourself and the the groundedness that must have taken you, you know, a long time to cultivate. I'm very
I'm still cultivating on. I'm cultivating it every single day. Yeah. I mean, it's only been 3 months of me saying no to teacher trainings, and that first no was hard. It was like, this is a teacher training that's well attended. I've been teaching in it for 5 years. They don't pay a little bit of money. And you're asking me again, like you've been asking me for years, and I'm just going to say no to resources. Or like, I was like leading this other training for this other school. Like, it's my training. They don't tell me what to do. It's well supported. It makes me a lot of money every year. And like, yeah, I'm not going to do it. I'm not even going to offer a pre-recorded version for passive income. This isn't the best use of my time and energy. It's so terrifying. I'm not even to the place where I'm going to make sure my mom hears I'm not sharing this recording with my mom because I don't want to have I don't want to have a conversation with her about capitalism and being a hard worker and having a career goal. But also I feel freed up by releasing that, like, I don't have a career goal. This is what I'm doing right now to get resources, but I'm steadily working to be in a place where that's a non-factor for me and other people. But yeah, I'm saying that to say, like, I'm still so much every day having to remind myself, like, okay, the bank said your bank balance is low. That's not real. It has real impact, but that's not real. And all you have to do is open up your mouth if you have a need. And like, I have to like talk to myself. I tell people this, but not everybody, but I'm telling you on this podcast. I look in the mirror and talk to myself all the time to say, like, that's not real, Kelley. Like, how that the feelings that are coming up for you are just more evidence, a bigger invitation for you to heal a story that's not true about yourself or the world that you're living in. And the invitation is for all of us to just be in the practice, like practice and all is coming. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Kelley Nicole,
Thank
for your
you.
time and your wisdom. This was such a beautiful conversation.
Yeah, thank y'all so much for the invitation and for all your patience with my fluctuating health and schedule. I appreciate it.